Today's topic at AIS Magnifier podcast, Zooming on Success playlist is language acquisition tips and strategies. AIS Magnifier podcast is an independent initiative born out of Adelaide International School's commitment to enhancing students' knowledge and well-being. From academic milestones to extracurricular knowledge, from personal growth to social impact, we uncover the multifaceted nature of success at AIS. Today I'm here with Mr. Vincent Hermann, AIS current EIF Humanity and Science teacher for SACE and EAL teacher for International Cambridge, a Certificate of General Secondary Education. Thank you again, Mr. Hermann, for being here. Once again, please introduce yourself.
No worries. I'm Mr. Herman. I've been at AIS for just over a year now, and I've been teaching for a good 14 years in many different faculties. So, yeah.
Thank you. To begin with, can you tell us about the journey in learning multiple languages and how many exactly languages do you speak?
So I speak about 7. Some of them less so than others, of course, but the journey started, obviously, my parents are Austrian, and so that was my background language. So Austrian and German I speak. English came pretty quickly because I was born here. So that was my first real language. My first learnt language was Japanese, and that was through school. And I continued that through uni and other further studies. Chinese came during high school because I went to an international high school. So I was immersed with mostly Chinese and various other people from multiple countries. So I learnt a little bit there. And then I continued that in my university studies. Spanish, a little bit through friends at high school, but mostly just general conversations with Spanish friends at uni. And then I ended up teaching Spanish at one of my schools. So I was really immersed directly into Spanish. A little bit of Indonesian, which I learnt from friends because I wanted to learn Indonesian because I had a lot of friends from Indonesia and around those areas. So I picked that up. Yeah.
So your mother language, do you think it's Austrian or?
My mother language is Austrian, yes.
Yeah. So we could say the first language that you really learned was English.
Correct, it was, yes.
For learning strategies, what are the most effective strategies for learning a new language?
I'm old school, so my most effective, I can tell you my most effective and probably the most effective for other people. So my most effective strategy was to learn through books and rote learning and memorizing words and remembering them and then using them in sentences. Nowadays, there's a lot more technology and a lot more access to international people around Adelaide and around Australia. So there's a lot more ability to use an app, to listen, to respond and go, instant feedback that way. So you can hear the sound through an app. You can hear it through that sort of tape sort of area. And you also have access to other people from different cultures around. You can, I think it's a lot better and easier to talk to them, to speak first, and then learn what you're speaking about afterwards. So learn the language through other speaking and then back it up with some further learning down the track.
Speaking about these digital, strategies that you just mentioned, do you recommend any resources, like a website specifically?
I don't know because, again, I'm old school, so I still use books. I think if you're using it, I mean, Duolingo is a common one. I find it to be a little bit, but a lot of people use it, and it does give you the basis. It does start off, and it does show you bits and pieces. I have done a little bit of language learning through that. I've done a little bit of Arabic and stuff through Duolingo, so I picked up a little bit. And I find it's useful to an extent, but it doesn't really give you that whole experience. You can't really talk to it and hope it responds like a real person. So I think there are certain apps that you can get, like language-specific apps that are probably a lot better.
Yeah.
That have a whole gamut of stuff that would be better than that.
Around language learning and multilinguistic, pathway of living, there are lots of cognitive and psychological aspects of it, and there are also some myths going around. So first thing I wanted to know about your cognitive benefits. So how has learning multiple languages impacted your cognitive abilities or thinking processes? Is it really true that they help you with them or not?
A significant amount, I think, because the fact of the matter is you need to learn a different way, different grammatical systems.
In expressing
So
yourself.
that's correct. Yeah. So different languages have different cultures, and different cultures have different ways of expressing themselves through different ways. So we could say it a different way to another culture or another language. If we say something, it might be a different meaning entirely to them. So you have to think about that different way. You also need to think about their grammatical structure. So subject, object, verb, object, just subject, verb. Is it verb first? So you have to think about different ways of, and then you've got to really ingrain that into your mind as well. So it's a constant process of not only memorization, but thinking about which language you're thinking in and how you're going to get that out. So it does help cognitively in that way, but it also helps your memory because you need to remember different languages.
It was actually one of my questions if you have noticed any changes in your problem solving or memory just because of learning a new language.
Yes,
which
both.
You just mentioned.
Yeah.
Perfect. For practical applications, how has learning different languages influenced your understanding of number of cultures? Like, for example, many countries speak German, Spanish. You just mentioned Indonesian, and the majority of people on Earth speak Chinese, of course.
Yes.
So how about that one? How did they influence your understanding of their culture?
Well, learning the language, some of my language learning, particularly in Chinese, was language through culture. So I was learning the culture first and ingraining it with the language. So learning the language really helps understand how they feel, how they act. Because, for instance, I'll give you an example, a very clear example of Japanese. So, for instance, in English, certainly in Australia, we have just a standard hello, how are you, what are you doing? Regardless of who you're talking to, a friend, how are you going? What are you doing today? Are you all right? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas in Japanese and some Asian cultures and many other cultures as well, they have different levels of how you can speak to them, respectful language. So you need to really understand who you're talking to. Are you talking to a superior? Are you talking to a friend? Are you talking to the king? And the most important person in the world? You have different language sets. So you need to remember that when you're talking about different cultures. So that really comes as a part of language learning. And you don't really understand or know this unless you're learning the language and the culture behind the language. Right. So, yeah.
Let's make the podcast a little bit more fun. Do you have any funny or embarrassing, actually, language learning stories you can share with us?
Okay, this is a good question. Because I've learned so many languages, I find myself, I find myself speaking multiple at once or stopping halfway through a sentence and thinking of the word in that language while I'm speaking, for instance, Chinese to a Chinese person. I'm halfway through a sentence and then I accidentally slip in the Japanese word for something like telephone or desk or something.
Yeah, in neuroscience, they talk about it as code mixing.
Yes.
When you just mix things up, your brain is just constantly thinking in both or for you. It's like a bunch of languages.
Yeah.
And then they find a way of going that way, but it's in different language. That's why it gets to be like that. But although they might be embarrassing, but what is the most rewarding moment you had as a multilingual?
I think the most rewarding moment was actually going overseas in the country and just talking to them. Being able to communicate properly. Yeah. Not just this, that, hello. But actually, how much? Or just one word or two words, but actually going there and going,
I can know them, their family, their culture.
And talk to them properly. Being able to access trains, ask the directions, know their family, know the people there in their language. And I think that makes them a little bit happier as well, in being able to comprehend and talk to them so they can talk back comfortably.
Many of our viewers might be beginners in the pathway of learning a new language. So for my last question, what advice would you give to someone just starting their language learning journey?
I think it's important to not give up, to keep trying. You think you can, I've forgotten the word for this, I've forgotten the word for that, oh, it's too hard, I can't remember any of this. Don't worry about that. Like, people make mistakes, even in their native language. They stop, they go, I can't remember the word for this. What is it? Blah, 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 blah. And then they think they make stupid mistakes, so they stop. They go, I don't know what I'm saying, so I'm going to stop. I think that's important to not, because the person listening to you will understand. They'll go, okay, you're a language learner. Maybe they'll help you with the word, or maybe they'll say, okay, no, and they'll continue the conversation. Don't stop. Try as much as you can. Talk to as many people as you can in that language, regardless of how simple it is to begin with.
Thank you once again, Mr. Hermann, for being here and sharing your valuable knowledge to the AIS community and our viewers. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please stay tuned for the next episode and don't forget to support us. Last but not least, thank you for your interest in AIS Magnifier. Thank you.